I never thought my career at Sterling Technologies would end like this, in front of 50 stunned colleagues, with VP Marcus Thomas smirking as he publicly destroyed my reputation. But sometimes life's lowest moments become our greatest opportunities. I just didn't know it yet. My name is Sarah Chen, and this is how I turned a humiliating firing into the greatest corporate checkmate of my career. The morning started like any other Tuesday at Sterling's gleaming downtown headquarters. I arrived early, as usual, laptop tucked under my arm, green tea in hand. The security guard, Joe, gave me his usual warm smile. "Another early start, Ms. Chen?" he asked, scanning my badge. "You know me, Joe. Early bird gets the worm." I smiled back, not knowing these would be my last normal moments in the building I'd called home for 5 years. The first sign something was wrong came when I noticed Jenny from HR hovering near my desk, pretending to be fascinated by something on her phone. Jenny never came to our floor unless something was happening, usually something bad. "Morning, Jenny," I said carefully, setting down my tea. "Everything okay?" She jumped slightly, guilty eyes meeting mine. "Oh, Sarah, yes, everything's. There's a mandatory team meeting in conference room at 9. Don't be late." My stomach tightened. 5 years in corporate America teaches you to read the signs. Mandatory meetings called with no notice. HR lurking around. The fake cheerfulness in Jenny's voice. Something was definitely wrong. I opened my laptop, quickly backing up key files to my personal drive. Another lesson learned from years in the corporate world. Always be prepared. As I worked, my mind raced through possible scenarios. Budget cuts, reorganization. I just landed the Morrison account last week, bringing in a $500,000 contract. My numbers were good. Better than good. Then I saw the calendar notification. Morrison Industries final contract review. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the $2 million expansion deal I'd been nurturing for months. Everything clicked into place. Marcus Thomas, our recently appointed VP of Sales, had been gunning for my clients since he arrived 6 months ago, especially Morrison Industries. Too important for a regular account manager, he'd said in our first meeting, eyes dismissing me entirely. "We need someone with more executive presence." I'd seen his type before, the kind of manager who built their career by taking credit for others' work. But Marcus was especially skilled at it. In 6 months, he'd managed to get his name on 3 major deals he had nothing to do with. Now he wanted Morrison Industries, my biggest potential client. At exactly 9 a.m., I walked into conference room A, head held high. The room was packed, every sales team member present, along with key executives. Marcus stood at the front, his expensive suit and carefully styled hair screaming corporate success. Next to him, looking uncomfortable, was our CEO, David Patterson. "Ah, Sarah, so glad you could join us," Marcus said, his smile never reaching his eyes. "We were just discussing some concerning developments." I took my seat, noting how my colleagues avoided eye contact. They knew what was coming, probably had for days. "It has come to our attention," Marcus continued, pacing like a prosecutor delivering his opening statement, "that there have been serious irregularities in some of our key accounts. Specifically, the Morrison Industries account." My heart raced, but I kept my face neutral. 5 years of poker nights with my brother were about to pay off. "We've discovered," he paused for dramatic effect, "that someone has been falsifying client communications, making unauthorized promises, and potentially putting Sterling Technologies at risk of losing millions." The room was silent. I could hear the air conditioning humming overhead. "Sarah Chen," he pointed at me, voice dripping with fake regret, "you're being terminated for gross incompetence and ethical violations. Security will escort you out." I saw 2 security guards I didn't recognize enter the room. Not Joe, of course not. Joe knew me too well. This was it. The moment Marcus had planned so carefully. He'd wait for me to be escorted out, then swoop in to save the Morrison Industries deal. He'd be the hero, and I'd be the cautionary tale people whispered about. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake. I stood slowly, smoothing my blazer. "Before security escorts me out," I said calmly, my voice carrying in the silent room, "perhaps we should discuss tomorrow's meeting with Morrison Industries." Marcus waved dismissively. "I'll handle all your accounts going forward." "Really?" I smiled. "Then you can explain to CEO James Morrison why the customized integration protocol his IT team requested isn't ready." The one that took 3 months to develop? The one only I understand. Marcus's face twitched, first crack in his perfect facade. Or maybe you can walk him through the specialized pricing model we developed for their Asian expansion, the one that required special approval from our board. David Patterson leaned forward, frowning. What pricing model? The one Mr. Thomas hasn't been briefed on, I said sweetly, because he's been too busy planning this moment to actually review the Morrison file. The room had gone from uncomfortable silence to electric tension. Everyone knew what losing Morrison Industries would mean. It wasn't just the $2 million initial contract. It was the potential $20 million in business over the next 5 years. This is ridiculous, Marcus sputtered. Security, remove her. Mr. Patterson, I turned to our CEO, ignoring Marcus completely. Would you like to explain to the board why we lost Morrison Industries? Or should we take a closer look at exactly what's been happening here? David Patterson had been CEO for 15 years for a reason. He could smell a disaster coming. Guards, wait outside, he ordered. Marcus, sit down. Sarah, you have 5 minutes to explain what's going on. I pulled out my laptop, connecting it to the room's display. Let me show you exactly what's been happening at Sterling Technologies for the past 6 months. As I pulled up document after document, email after email, Marcus's face went from red to white. He hadn't expected this. He thought I'd cry, make a scene, be escorted out in shame. He didn't know that for the past 6 months, I'd been documenting everything. Every changed meeting time he hadn't informed me about. Every email he'd accidentally left me off of. Every client communication he tried to intercept. And most importantly, every single detail of the Morrison Industries deal that he couldn't possibly understand in time for tomorrow's meeting. But this was just the beginning. Marcus's carefully planned takedown was about to become his worst nightmare and my greatest triumph. Little did he know, I had more evidence waiting at home. Evidence that would turn this attempted firing into the biggest mistake of his career. That night, sitting in my home office surrounded by 5 years' worth of documentation, I smiled at my computer screen. While Marcus had been plotting my downfall, I'd been building something much more powerful. The truth. My phone buzzed. A text from Jenny in HR. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I wanted to warn you. The things Marcus is saying about you now. I could imagine. People like Marcus Thomas didn't take public humiliation well. He'd be in damage control mode, trying to salvage his reputation by destroying mine even further. But I'd expected this. It's okay, Jenny, I texted back. Just keep documenting everything he says. Like we discussed. Jenny had been my silent ally for months. After witnessing Marcus take credit for Angela's project in marketing, leading to her quiet resignation, Jenny had approached me with concerns about his pattern of behavior. Together, we created a paper trail that would prove invaluable. My laptop pinged with an email notification from James Morrison himself. Sarah, heard some disturbing rumors about changes at Sterling. Call me ASAP. Perfect. Marcus's plan was already backfiring. He thought he could simply step into my client relationships, not understanding that in high-level corporate sales, trust and knowledge were everything. I dialed James's number, which he answered on the first ring. Sarah, what the hell is going on over there? I just got a call from some VP trying to reschedule tomorrow's meeting, saying you're no longer with the company. Mr. Morrison, I replied calmly, I think we need to have a conversation about Sterling Technologies' future and your company's place in it. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can you meet me at the Capitol Grill in an hour? Make it 30 minutes. As I changed into my best suit, I thought about the path that had led here. Marcus wasn't the first corporate predator I'd encountered, just the most ambitious. In my 15-year career, I'd learned that people like him counted on others being too afraid, too nice, or too unprepared to fight back. The Capitol Grill was quiet at 9 p.m. James Morrison sat at his usual corner table, martini untouched in front of him. At 65, he'd built Morrison Industries from a small consulting firm into a global technology powerhouse. He didn't suffer fools gladly. Talk to me, Sarah, he said as I sat down. For the next hour, I laid out everything. Marcus's systematic pattern of client appropriation, the real numbers behind Sterling's recent successes, and most importantly, the potential impact on Morrison Industries' expansion plans. The integration protocol we developed isn't just a technical solution. I explained, pulling out my tablet. It's built on my understanding of your Asian market strategy. Marcus doesn't even know about the regulatory compliance issues in Singapore that we solved. James studied the documents I showed him, his expression darkening. And Patterson allows this behavior. David's a good CEO, but Marcus is very good at managing up. He takes credit for successes and deflects failures. Until today, it worked perfectly. And now? I smiled, pulling out one final document. Now, Mr. Morrison, I have a proposition for you, one that could solve both our problems. The next morning, I walked into Sterling Technologies at precisely 8:45 a.m. The security guard, Joe, was back on duty, winked at me as I passed. Word of yesterday's failed firing had spread fast. Marcus was already in the conference room, surrounded by binders and looking like he hadn't slept. He barely contained his shock at seeing me. What are you doing here? Security. Save it, Marcus, I said, setting up my laptop. Mr. Patterson asked me to join this meeting. In fact, here he comes now. David Patterson walked in, followed by two men in expensive suits I recognized as board members. Behind them came James Morrison and his entire executive team. Mr. Thomas, James said coldly, I don't believe we've met. Though you did try to call me yesterday about canceling this meeting. Marcus stood, straightening his tie, switching on his charm. Mr. Morrison, yes, I apologize for any confusion. I'm now handling your account personally, and I've reviewed all the materials. Really? James interrupted. Then perhaps you can explain why the Singapore Compliance Protocol doesn't account for Section 47B of their new data protection laws. Marcus's mouth opened and closed silently. Or maybe, James continued, you can walk us through the specialized API integration requirements for our legacy systems. The ones Sarah designed specifically for our infrastructure. That is, Marcus looked desperately at David Patterson, but found no help there. Sit down, Marcus, David said quietly. Sarah, please proceed with the presentation. For the next 2 hours, I led the meeting I'd spent months preparing for. I walked through every detail of the integration plan, every cost-saving measure, every potential challenge and solution. The Morrison team asked tough questions, which I answered confidently, while Marcus shrank further into his chair. When I finished, James Morrison stood up. David, your company has developed an impressive solution. However, given recent events, we have concerns about Sterling's management stability. David Patterson's face fell. This was what he'd feared. Losing a $20 million account because of Marcus's games. That's why, James continued, we'll only proceed under one condition. Sarah Chen must be our primary contact with full autonomy over our account, and not just as an account manager. He turned to me. Sarah, we'd like you to head up a new division at Sterling, focused on international client integration. VP-level position reporting directly to David. That is, if the board approves. The board members nodded quickly. They knew exactly what was at stake. Of course, David said, shooting Marcus a look that promised a very unpleasant conversation to come. We'd be happy to create that position. Excellent, James smiled. One more thing. We're increasing our initial investment to $5 million. Sarah's analysis of our Asian market potential convinced us to accelerate our timeline. As the meeting wrapped up, Marcus tried to slip out quietly. Oh, Mr. Thomas, James called after him. A word of advice, in the future, when you try to take credit for someone else's work, make sure you at least understand what that work entails. Later that afternoon, I sat in my new corner office, watching the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Jenny poked her head in. Marcus just left the building. Permanent leave of absence, they're calling it. She grinned. His face was priceless when security escorted him out. I thought about the poetry of it, Marcus leaving the same way he planned for me to leave. But I felt no satisfaction in his humiliation. Instead, I felt grateful for the lessons this experience had taught me. Success in corporate America isn't just about talent or hard work. It's about preparation, documentation, building real relationships, and most importantly, knowing your true worth. My phone buzzed with a text from James Morrison. Dinner next week? Want to discuss expanding that Singapore initiative. I smiled, remembering something my father used to say. In business, as in life, your reputation is built on what you create, not what you destroy. Marcus had tried to build his success by destroying others. I built mine by creating value, solving problems, and earning trust. In the end, that made all the difference. The next morning, as I walked into Sterling Technologies, now as Vice President of International Client Integration, I stopped to chat with Joe. "Big changes, Ms. Chen," he said, smiling warmly. "Just on the outside, Joe," I replied. "I'm still the same early bird." "Same early bird," he agreed, "but now you've got a much bigger nest." As I rode the elevator to my new floor, I thought about all the other talented people out there facing their own Marcus Thomases. I made a mental note to start a mentorship program at Sterling. Success is sweetest when shared, after all. And Marcus, last I heard, he was consulting corporate code for unemployed. Sometimes karma works quickly in the corporate world. But my story isn't about revenge. It's about standing your ground, knowing your worth, and being prepared when opportunity meets crisis. In the end, Marcus didn't fail because of my actions. He failed because he never understood a fundamental truth. Real success comes from what you build, not what you tear down. As for me, I had a $5 million integration project to launch, a new team to build, and a future to create. The view from my office reminded me gaily that the sky isn't the limit, it's just the beginning. When people ask me now about that infamous day of my almost firing, I just smile and tell them what I've learned. Sometimes your greatest professional triumph comes disguised as your worst career disaster. You just have to be prepared, be patient, and be ready to rise when the moment comes.